The year is 2023, October. The air in the valley is crisp. It smells of drying leaves and rich soil. A black truck, sleek and silent, turns off the county road. It kicks up a small cloud of dust. The logo on the door is subtle. Appalachian Gold Distillery. It pulls to a stop beside a field unlike any other in the county. Not corn, not soy. This is a field of sorghum. Tall, thick-stalked, with heavy seed heads drooping in the autumn sun. A man walks out from a barn to meet the truck. Elias Thorne. He is 41 years old. His hands are stained with the work of the land. He nods. He doesn't smile. A woman gets out of the passenger side. She wears a lab coat over her jeans. Her name is Dr. Eris Thorne. No relation. She carries a small, serious-looking case. She greets Elias with a respectful nod. "May I?" she asks, gesturing to the field. Elias gestures back. "The field is yours to see." She walks into the first row. She selects a stalk of the sweet sorghum. It is nearly 10 feet tall, thick as a man's wrist. From her case, she takes a hand press and a refractometer. She cuts a small piece of the cane. She crushes it in the press. A single drop of clear, sweet juice wells up. She places the drop on the lens of the refractometer. She holds it to her eye. The world goes silent for a moment, just the sound of the wind in the sorghum leaves. Her colleague, a man in a clean flannel shirt, watches her face. He has seen this look before, but not like this. She lowers the instrument. She looks at it again, as if to be sure. She turns to her colleague. Her voice is quiet, almost a whisper. 32 bricks. The man's eyebrows go up. 32? He mouths silently. She nods. Unbelievable, completely unheard of. This is it. This is the one. She turns and walks back towards Elias. He stands waiting, his expression unchanged. He has seen this before, too. "Mr. Thorne," she says, "we'll take it. All of it. The whole field." Her colleague steps forward. "Name your price per ton. We'll pay it. And we'll pay a premium for an exclusive contract. For the next 10 years. Elias looks past them, past the shiny truck, past the road, to a faded sign at the edge of his property. A sign his grandfather hammered into the ground. Thorne Family Farm. Established 1922. He looks back at the two people from the distillery, and for the first time, he allows a small, slow smile. This is the story of a crop nobody wanted, a man few people believed in, and the quiet decade it took to prove them all wrong. If you believe in the stories of American grit, the ones written in dirt and sweat, not in headlines, then subscribe to this channel, because we tell the stories of the ones who do the work, the ones who prove that the most powerful things can grow from the stoniest ground. What happened here started 10 years earlier. It started with a kind man saying no. The year is 2013, March. The snow has melted, leaving the ground soft and wounded. Elias Thorne is 31 years old. He stands in the yard of his family's farm. The farm is 80 acres. 80 acres of sloping, rocky soil that the big operators never wanted. His father had passed in January, a quiet man who fought the land his whole life and loved it for the fight. He left Elias the land, the old tractor, and a few words that echoed in the quiet house. "They can take everything else, Elias. They can't take the dirt. The dirt is enough." Elias held on to those words. They were his inheritance, more valuable than the 80 acres. He decided he would not plant corn. He would not plant soy. He would not chase subsidies and fight commodity prices. He would plant something else. He would plant his grandfather's sorghum, a tall, sweet cane variety called Sugar Drip. It hadn't been grown in the county for 50 years. It was a memory, a ghost crop. But Elias had a few pounds of seed saved by his father in a dusty jar. He had the land, he had the will. He did not have a harvester. A sorghum harvester is a specialized machine, different from a corn chopper, different from a combine. He found a used one for sale 3 states away, a single-row pull-behind model from the 1980s. It cost $5,000. $5,000 he did not have. So he did what farmers in his valley had always done. He went to the co-op. He went to see Frank Miller. Frank Miller was the head of the local agricultural co-op. He sat on the loan board. He was a pillar of the community, coached Little League, served as a church deacon. Frank was a good man, a kind man, a certain man. His office was warm, paneled in dark wood, covered in plaques for community service. Frank had known Elias's father. He'd known his grandfather. He greeted Elias with a firm, warm handshake. He poured him a cup of coffee. He listened. He listened patiently as Elias laid out his plan. The 80 acres, the sugar drip sorghum, the niche market for artisanal syrup, the $5,000 loan for the harvester. When Elias finished, Frank leaned back in his leather chair. He steepled his fingers. He looked at Elias with genuine concern, a look of profound, fatherly kindness. "Elias," he said, "son, I knew your father. A finer man never worked this soil. And I respect what you're trying to do. I truly do. But I cannot approve this loan." Elias felt the air leave the room. Frank continued. His voice was gentle, reasonable. "I've been in this business for 30 years. There is no market for that sorghum. None. The co-op can't buy it. We don't have the equipment to process it. The elevators aren't set up for it. The yield per acre is a fraction of modern corn. You'll put all that work in, and at the end of the season, you'll have a field full of something you can't sell. It's a beautiful idea, a wonderful piece of history, but it's not a business. It's a hobby. And the bank doesn't lend money for hobbies." Elias tried to speak, but Frank held up a hand. "Let me be clear. I'm not going to be the man who signs the paper that puts you under. I'm not going to be the one who helps you lose your father's farm. It would be irresponsible. It would be a disservice to your father's memory." Frank leaned forward. His eyes were earnest. He truly believed what he was saying. He believed he was protecting this young man from himself. "Here's what we'll do," he said, his voice now full of energy. "We'll set you up with a loan for corn. Roundup ready, the best seed. I'll get you a great rate on fertilizer and herbicide. You'll have a guaranteed buyer right here at the co-op. It's the smart play. It's the safe play. It's the only play." Elias sat there. The coffee was cold in his hand. Frank's kindness was a wall. It was more impenetrable than anger. You couldn't fight it. You couldn't argue with it. It was a kindness born of certainty. The certainty that he knew what was best for Elias, that he saw the world more clearly. Elias stood up. He placed the coffee cup on the polished desk. "Thank you for your time, Frank." "That's it?" Frank asked, surprised. "You're not going to argue?" Elias shook his head. "No, sir. You've made your position clear." As Elias walked out of the co-op, the smell of fertilizer and processed grain filled his lungs. He felt the weight of Frank's certainty. It was heavier than any debt. The most dangerous limitation is the one imposed by someone who genuinely believes they are protecting you. Certainty about another person's capabilities, delivered with kindness. It is more damaging than outright hostility, because it cannot be fought with anger. It can only be disproven, with decades of work. Elias drove home. The truck rattled on the gravel road. The world felt gray. He parked in the yard and sat there for a long time. He watched the wind move through the bare trees. Frank's words echoed in his head. A hobby, not a business. He went inside. The house was cold. He sat at the old kitchen table, his father's table. He pulled out a stack of his father's old ledgers, hardbound books filled with elegant, spidery handwriting, records of harvests, rainfall, expenses, decades of a life spent working the dirt. He opened one from 1975. In the back, on a blank page, his father had written a note. Just a few lines. Grandpa Thorne always said the sorghum was the farm's soul. It asks for little. It weathers the drought. It gives back sweetness from the hardest ground. The world wants corn now. The world is wrong. Elias read the words again and again. He closed the book. He knew what he had to do. Alone wasn't permission. It was just one path. There had to be another. The next morning, he drove to a garage on the other side of the county. The sign was so faded you could barely read it. Silas Black, mechanic. Silas was 70 years old. His hands were permanently black with grease. He had been Elias's father's best friend. He was sitting on a stool, meticulously cleaning a carburetor. He saw Elias and grunted. "Heard you went to see Frankie Miller. News travels fast," Elias said. "It's a small valley," Silas replied, not looking up. "And full of people who think they know your business." "Let me guess." He said no. "He was very kind about it," Elias said. "Kindness is cheap," Silas grumbled. "A bolt costs $1. Kindness costs nothing." "So what's the plan? Plant corn like a good little boy?" Elias shook his head. "I need a harvester, Silas, and I have no money." Now Silas looked up. A slow grin spread across his face. "No money?" He chuckled. "Son, you're finally thinking like a farmer." "Alone? You don't need a loan. You need what your grandpa had. Guts and grease. Come with me." He led Elias to the back of his property, to a place where old machines went to die, a graveyard of rusted tractors and forgotten implements. He pointed to a shape under a rotting canvas tarp. "There she is." He pulled the tarp away. It was a harvester. A 1958 Alice Chalmers single-row sorghum harvester. It was a skeleton of rust. The tires were gone. The engine was a block of corrosion. Birds had nested in the cutting head. Elias stared at it. "This?" Silas patted a rusted fender. "She's got good bones. Your grandpa bought her new. Harvested with her for 20 years. When he passed, your dad parked her here. Said he couldn't bear to look at it. Said it was from a different time." He was right. It is from a different time. A time when you fixed things instead of financing them. "Can we fix it?" Elias asked. Silas spat on the ground. "Can we fix it? Boy, with enough coffee and cuss words, you can fix the world." And so began the rebuild. It was a long spring. They worked every evening. After Elias finished his day job driving a truck for the lumber yard. The air in Silas's garage was thick with the smell of penetrating oil and grinding metal. The sound of wrenches and hammers echoed into the night. They pulled the engine. A simple, stubborn, two-cylinder beast. Silas declared it salvageable. They took it apart piece by piece, cleaned every piston, every valve, in a bucket of gasoline. They honed the cylinders by hand, ordered new gaskets from a specialist in Kansas. They fabricated parts that no longer existed. A new chain sprocket cut from a piece of plate steel with a torch and a file. A replacement bearing housing welded together from scrap. Silas taught Elias how to weld, how to read the metal, how to listen to an engine. Elias's hands, soft from driving a truck, became hard and calloused. He learned the language of machinery, the quiet satisfaction of a bolt breaking free after a long fight, the precision of setting the timing just right, the hope contained in the first spark of a new plug. By May, the engine was back on the frame, painted a fresh, defiant Alice Chalmers orange. They moved to the harvesting mechanism. The gathering chains were a mess of frozen links. They soaked them in diesel for a week, worked each link free with a hammer and a punch, replaced the ones that were too far gone, sharpened the cutting blades on a grinding wheel. Sparks flew in the dim light of the garage, each spark a small victory against decay, a small rebellion against Frank Miller's certainty. Finally, one evening in late May, it was done. They put gas in the tank, hooked up a battery. Elias climbed into the simple metal seat. Silas stood back, arms crossed. "All right, son," he said. "Let's see if we built a harvester or a bomb." Elias turned the key. The starter groaned. The engine coughed once, twice. It sputtered. And then, with a roar and a cloud of blue smoke, it caught. It settled into a rough, beautiful idle, a rhythm from another time, the sound of self-sufficiency, the sound of a problem solved not with a signature, but with your own two hands. Elias looked at Silas. Silas was smiling, a real smile. "See?" he yelled over the engine's roar. "Who needs a bank? The dirt is enough!" And sometimes, a little bit of grease. That summer, Elias planted 10 acres of sugar-drip sorghum. He used his father's old tractor. The seeds felt small and hopeful in his hand. The field was on a slope, right by the road, visible to everyone who drove by. The sorghum grew. It grew tall and thick, a deep, vibrant green. It looked strange next to the neat, uniform rows of his neighbor's corn. It looked wild, untamed, like something from the past. The community watched. They were a community of doubters. Not out of malice, but out of a deep-seated pragmatism. They knew what worked, and this wasn't it. Neighbors would stop their trucks by the fence. "What is that stuff, Elias?" "Sorghum. You can't sell that at the co-op, you know." "I know. Frank Miller was right. You're wasting good land. You could get 200 bushels of corn an acre off that slope." "Maybe." They'd shake their heads and drive away, whispering about pride, about a young man too stubborn to listen to his elders. But one afternoon, an old farmer named Henry stopped. He was Silas's brother. He walked into the field. He broke off a piece of the stalk and chewed on it. He closed his eyes. "My dad used to grow this," he said. "Tastes like sunshine and hard work." "Don't you listen to them, boy. You're not growing a crop. You're growing a memory." Those words were water on dry ground. In late September, the sorghum was ready. The seed heads were heavy and dark. The stalks were swollen with sugar. Elias hitched the old orange harvester to his tractor. It looked like a museum piece. He drove it into the field. It worked. It rattled. It shook. It complained. But it worked. It cut the stalks cleanly. It stripped the leaves. It laid the cane in neat rows. It took him a week to harvest the 10 acres. A week of long, dusty, satisfying days. When he was done, he loaded a few stalks of the cane into his truck. He drove to the co-op. He knew what Frank had said, but he had to try. A young man he didn't know was working the scales. Elias laid a piece of the cane on the counter. "I'd like to get this tested," he said, "for moisture and sugar content." The young man looked at the cane. He looked at Elias. "What is it?" "Sweet sorghum." He picked it up. "We don't buy this. I'm not asking you to buy it. I'm asking you to test it." The young man shrugged. He called someone on the radio. A minute later, Frank Miller walked out from the office. He saw Elias. He saw the cane on the counter. A sad, tired look came over his face. "Hello, Elias." "Frank." "Harvest is in, I see." "It is." Frank picked up the stalk. He ran his thumb over its smooth surface. "It's beautiful, just like I remember from when I was a boy." "But son, I told you, it's useless to us. We have no way to process it, no market for it. I can't even give you a number for it. It doesn't exist in our system." The word hung in the air. Useless. Elias looked at the stalk of sorghum. He thought of the long spring nights in Silas's garage. The feel of the sun on his back during the harvest, the taste of the sweet juice. He looked at Frank. "It's not useless to me," he said quietly. He picked up the cane, and he walked out. He didn't look back. Have you ever built something with your own hands? Something that other people called useless? Have you ever had to create your own value because the existing world refused to see it? Let me know in the comments, because this is where the story turns. This is where Elias Thorne stopped trying to fit into the old market and started building a new one. One jar of syrup at a time. He went home from the co-op that day. He did not feel defeated. He felt free. Frank Miller had drawn a line, and Elias was now on the other side of it. Alone, but free. He remembered how his grandfather used to make syrup, the old way. He built a small, simple press from a hydraulic jack and some steel I-beams. He bought a large, flat stainless steel pan. He set it up over a fire pit behind the barn. He spent the next month pressing his sorghum cane and boiling the juice down into syrup. The work was slow, hot, sticky. The air for half a mile around his farm smelled sweet, like caramel and earth. By the end of October, he had 200 glass jars filled with dark, rich sorghum syrup. It was unlike anything you could buy in a store. It tasted of the soil, of the sun, of a specific piece of ground. He set up a card table at the end of his driveway. He made a simple, hand-painted sign. Thorne Family Sorghum. He sold every single jar in 3 weekends, to locals, to people from the city, out for a drive to see the autumn leaves. They tasted it. Their eyes would light up. "What is this?" "It's just sorghum," Elias would say. He made $4,000. After expenses, it wasn't much, but it was his. It was cash, and it was proof. Proof that useless was just a matter of opinion. The next year, 2014, he planted 15 acres. He bought a few more jars. He built a better sign. That summer, a food blogger from the city was driving through. She stopped. She bought a jar. She went home and wrote a post about it. She called it Sunshine in a Jar. The post went viral. People started driving out from the city to find his farm. He sold 500 jars that year. He made $12,000. Cash. Frank Miller would drive past Elias's farm on his way home from the co-op. He would see the line of cars parked along the road. He would see the little stand. He would see Elias talking to customers. He would shake his head, a small smile on his face, a smile of pity. Or maybe, just maybe, confusion. The boy was stubborn. You had to give him that. By 2017, Elias had planted 25 acres. He was still working his job at the lumber yard, farming in the evenings, on weekends. He took the money he had saved. He bought a small, used bottling machine. Cash. He bought a labeling machine. Cash. He built a website. He started shipping his syrup all over the country. Orders came in from California, New York, Texas, people who wanted something real, something with a story. That year, he cleared $45,000. He quit his job at the lumber yard. He was a full-time farmer. On a farm everyone said was worthless. With a crop everyone said was useless. In 2019, the 20-acre plot next to his came up for sale. An old farmer had retired. His kids didn't want it. They were going to sell it to a developer. Elias went to the bank, not for a loan, but to make a withdrawal. He bought the 20 acres. Cash. He now owned 100 acres, free and clear. He wasn't just growing sorghum. He was healing the land. He planted cover crops in the winter, clover and rye, to build up the soil. He stopped tilling. He let the earthworms and the microbes do the work. His land grew richer, darker, healthier, while the cornfields around him grew paler, more dependent on chemical inputs. The math began to tell a story of contrast. His neighbors, growing corn, were spending hundreds of dollars per acre on GMO seed, on fertilizer, on herbicides and pesticides. They were getting big yields, but their margins were razor thin. They were always one bad harvest away from ruin. Elias's input costs were laughably low. He saved his own seed. He used no pesticides. His fertilizer was the green manure from his cover crops. His profit per acre was 3 times what his neighbors were making on corn. He was working with the land, not against it. He was proving his father right. The dirt was enough. The witness, Frank Miller, kept watching. He heard the talk at the co-op, heard about the website, heard about Elias buying the Miller place, with cash. The pity on his face when he drove by was gone, replaced by something else. Something he couldn't quite name. It was a look of profound, unsettling doubt. Not in Elias, but in himself, in his own certainty. The world was changing. A new movement was growing. A movement of people who cared about where their food came from. Craft brewers, artisanal bakers, and craft distillers. They were searching for unique ingredients, heirloom grains, crops with a story, crops with a soul. In 2022, a woman in Asheville, North Carolina, bought a jar of Elias's syrup online. She was the head of product development for Appalachian Gold Distillery, a company that was making a name for itself with high-end, innovative spirits. She gave the syrup to her head distiller. He tasted it. He stopped. He tasted it again. "This is not normal sorghum," he said. "The complexity, the notes of fruit and spice. This is something else." They did their research. They found the name of the heirloom variety, Sugar Drip. They looked at its genetic profile. They saw its potential, not for syrup, but for a spirit, a high-end, barrel-aged spirit in the tradition of rum or cachaça, made from the fresh-pressed juice of the cane, not molasses. They realized that the flavor they were tasting wasn't just from the plant, it was from the place, from Elias Thorne's 80 acres of rocky soil, from his methods, from his refusal to do things the easy way. It was the taste of terroir, the taste of a story. So they got in their truck, and they drove 6 hours north, into a small valley in a county no one paid much attention to. Which brings us back to that day in October, to the black truck, to the woman with the refractometer, to a number that shouldn't be possible. 32 bricks. A measure of sugar content so high it was almost mythical. A direct result of a decade of healing the soil, of nurturing a plant that belonged there. When the distillery's offer was made, it wasn't just a business transaction, it was a validation. It was a reckoning. Word travels fast in a small town. The news about the distillery truck, the multi-year contract, the price per ton they paid for Elias's useless sorghum. It spread from the diner to the feed store to the pews on Sunday morning. The price was 3 times what corn was fetching. Frank Miller heard it at the co-op. One of the farmers told him. He didn't believe it. He made a call, confirmed it was true. He finished his work for the day, but he didn't go home. He got in his truck, and he drove out to Elias Thorne's farm. He found Elias in the barn, not the old sagging barn of his father, but a new one, clean and well lit, paid for with cash. Elias was working on the old harvester, the 1958 Alice Chalmers. He wasn't using it anymore. He had a new, modern harvester for that. He was just maintaining the old one, cleaning it, greasing it, honoring it. Frank walked in. The barn was quiet, just the sound of a wrench on a bolt. "Elias," Frank said. Elias looked up. He wiped his hands on a rag. "Frank." Frank walked closer. He looked at the old harvester, still orange, still proud. "I heard about the distillery," he said. His voice was quiet, humbled. He stopped. He took a breath. "I was wrong, Elias. 10 years ago, in my office, I was wrong. I was so sure, so certain I was doing the right thing, that I was protecting you from a mistake." Elias looked at Frank. He saw a man who was not his enemy, a man who was, in his own way, a good man, a man trapped by the confines of his own experience. Elias didn't gloat. He didn't say, "I told you so." He just nodded. He leaned against the old harvester, the physical proof of the path Frank had told him not to take. "You are being kind, Frank. I've always known that. But proving someone wrong who thinks they're being kind, it's the loneliest work there is. You can't fight it with anger. It doesn't respond to logic. You just have to do the work. You have to build the proof. And it takes years. It took me 10. The words hung in the quiet air of the barn. There was no bitterness in Elias's voice, only a profound, quiet truth. The truth of a decade spent in the wilderness of other people's certainty. Frank Miller had nothing to say. There was nothing he could say. He just nodded, turned around, and walked out of the barn, leaving Elias with his memories and his machines. Elias Thorne's story did not end with that contract. It began. The distillery deal gave him capital, but he didn't buy a bigger house or a fancier truck. He bought more land. Another 100 acres. Cash. He began to restore it. He hired 2 young men from the valley, gave them good jobs, taught them his methods. He didn't hoard his knowledge. He shared it. He started the Heirloom Growers Alliance, a new kind of co-op. He went to his neighbors, the ones who had doubted him. Many were struggling, trapped in the cycle of debt and commodity prices. He made them an offer. Convert a portion of your land to an heirloom grain, sorghum or millet or buckwheat. I'll provide the seed. I'll teach you how to grow it without chemicals, and I'll guarantee you a market. I'll connect you with the network of distillers, brewers, and chefs I've built. Some said no, too proud, too set in their ways. But a few said yes, a handful of farmers ready for a different path. Elias didn't just save his own farm, he built a lifeboat for others. He created a new economy in the valley, an economy based on quality, not quantity, on identity, not anonymity. He proved that the things the world calls inefficient, the things it calls hobbies, can be the very things that save us. And the harvester, the old 1958 Alice Chalmers, it sits in the corner of his new barn, a place of honor.
It is a physical artifact, a tangible link to the past, and a monument to self-sufficiency. Sometimes his son, who is now 10, will climb into the seat. He'll grip the steering wheel, and Elias will tell him the story of the machine that kindness told him he couldn't have, the story of a man named Silas, the story of his own father's words.
The dirt is enough. Frank Miller wasn't a bad man. He was a certain man. And certainty is the most dangerous gatekeeper of all. It builds walls and calls them foundations. It draws a line in the sand and calls it the horizon. It tells you what is possible for someone else. It mistakes the edge of its own vision for the edge of the world. Right now, somewhere in an office, in a boardroom, across a kitchen table, someone is being told no, for their own good. Someone is being protected from their own dream, by someone who is kind and certain. If this story reminds you of someone who refused to listen to that no, someone who went out and built their own yes, share this video with them. If you believe we need more stories about the quiet ones, the ones who do the work, the ones who understand that the dirt is enough, subscribe to this channel and tell us in the comments, who was the person who believed in you when it would have been easier not to? Who was the person who saw your useless idea and called it beautiful?